Hello, fellow lovers of the liminal and the weird, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Today I'm going to be talking about Arthur Machen's 1894 weird fiction novella, The Great God Pan. And the copy that I read it out of is Great Tales of Terror and the Supernatural, edited by Wagner and Wise. I say this novella came out in 1894, but a piece of it came out 4 years earlier in 1890, and it was in the Whirlwind magazine. In 1890, the first chapter of this short novella was published. This is the story of a man named Clark, who has agreed, although it doesn't seem like he wanted to necessarily, to witness a strange experimental surgery on a woman named Mary. And the person performing this surgery is a man named Dr. Raymond. And he studies the occult, and his idea is that he has found a way to do a small incision in a part of the brain that basically activates this cluster of nerves in the brain that we don't use, is the way that Dr. Raymond says it, that will allow his patients to behold the supernatural, to see the world as it really is, to break from the perception that the machines of our eyes cannot see, or kind of force us to see, break that and allow us to see the world as it really is in all of its supernatural glory. He compares it to a veil, that he will be lifting the veil from his patient's eyes. And Dr. Raymond is a friend of Mr. Clark, and that's why Mr. Clark has agreed to watch this. But Mr. Clark has a lot of reservations. He's very worried about it. But it seems that the young woman who he is performing this surgery on is very much willing to be a part of this. So he performs the surgery, and Mary opens her eyes and sees the world of the supernatural. And the way that Dr. Raymond describes what this process does is, he says what they used to call it back in the day was seeing the great god Pan. And the rest of the novel concerns, of course, what happens to Mary, and so on, so forth. This is a very, very creepy read. I've really been enjoying the weird tales that have been written from like 1890 to 1920. Such incredible stuff going on during these years. And this is a classic. One that I had never heard of until I started digging into weird tales. But once I did start digging, and people started talking about The Great God Pan, everybody said great things about it. This is a classic of the genre and absolutely worth a read. It is not as meditative and slow dread building as Algernon Blackwood, who did The Willows and the Wendigo, or William Hope Hodgson's House on the Borderland. This is slightly more complex writing, which I think does it both a service and a disservice, in the sense that when I read this, I had to pay attention, and I had to go back and reread passages quite a few times, because Machen was really trying to express an idea that he was nervous about expressing. And I will say that when this was published in 1894, it did actually tarnish his reputation quite a bit, because there was a lot of implied sexuality in this novella that did not go well at the time. So the author did have a lot to hide. He was trying to tell a story that was too much for the people that he was writing for at the time. But now we look back on it, it's absolutely incredible. Okay, should you read this? Absolutely. It was published, like I said, in the newspaper The Whirlwind, just that first chapter. Later there was a second chapter that was published as a short story. It wasn't connected. So what is now the third chapter was published in the Whirlwind again in 1891. So 2 pieces of this novel were published, one in 1890, the beginning, and then the 3rd chapter in 1891, and he realized them and put them together. So, just a quick bit of history. Arthur Machen is a Welsh writer. He grew up in the Welsh countryside, and the great god Pan was inspired by the times that he visited. I'm so sorry. I don't speak Welsh. I have no idea. So if I mess these up, I'm so sorry. But anyway, the times he visited Usk, which is a Welsh river, and the Welsh towns of Caerleon on the Usk and Caerwent as a boy. Sorry, I'm reading that straight from Wikipedia. I'm not doing justice to those names, but I think it's important. He also apparently visited what he called pagan ruins that were old Roman ruins that gave him the idea for this story, the great god Pan. One of the most exciting things about this story for me was the concept of this author from 1890 looking back to a time before industrialization and thinking about nature with a capital N and connecting it to this time that I think he considered very savage. And he connected it all to the god Pan. Pan is connected with nature. His name is said to be the inspiration for the word panic. But yeah, I think Machen thought that this was a very evil time. And I think coming from a very strict time, looking back at this time that would seem freer, could seem evil. And at one point he uses, in writing about what his inspiration for this story is, he connects Pan and the devil. The obvious implication of this story is that by unlocking this, by pulling aside this veil, that he is showing people the true evil of nature. If you replace Pan with demon or devil, it's the story of, say, removing the veil and seeing the devil at work all around us and what that would do to a person. Okay, from here on out is going to be spoilers. I'm going to talk about this all the way to the end. I love the idea that Machen explores in this of our eyes being unable to see the actual truth of the landscape. This idea that the eyes are not perfect machines, that we can only see a spectrum of visible light. In fact, it kind of became a theme over the past couple of weeks of what I've been reading. It connects with Clara and the Sun a lot as well. But I like this idea of Machen just saying, what if we could do just an easy thing, some small bit of surgery that would allow us to see all the truth around us. And the truth around us to Machen was the evil pagan stuff of the past, the nature of the past. And when he drops that veil from Mary at the very beginning, when he does that little bit of surgery, she wakes up, she opens her eyes, and she laughs a little bit, then she screams, and then she basically goes mad. She goes insane. And as far as Clark knows, she dies soon after. The novel then takes a huge turn. We leave all the characters we've known thus far, and we are told about a young girl named Helen, who is apparently the ward of a rich gentleman who wants her to live in the country and experience life in the Welsh countryside. So he puts her with a foster family, basically, and says, hey, let her run around and do whatever she wants. Like, I'm rich, you just let her do her thing. Don't worry about her education, she's already fine. You just let her run around and do her thing. And we get these crazy stories where a young boy is walking out in the countryside, and he's with his father, but he steps away for a bit, and suddenly he comes back screaming and says he saw this young woman, Helen, with without her clothes on, and there was a scary, terrifying man with him. And of course, the implication is that it's Pan, and that they were doing sexual things. And this goes on throughout the book, this kind of hinting at sexuality, the early sexuality before the morals of modernity came along. And it is interesting that he got in trouble for this book, for that hinted sexuality. The time that he was writing in was so prudish that he couldn't even imply the horror of these past sexualities. And then Helen grows up, she gets a husband, and apparently she's been having some very crazy parties, which are hints at orgies. And we see this kind of wake of destruction going behind Helen. This middle part was interesting because there was a lot of new characters introduced, and a lot of ideas that were really subtly hinted at that made it so I had to keep my full attention. And there was many a time when I had to go backwards and re-record because I wasn't keeping my full attention in order to understand what was going on. But I'm going to really simplify this, which is doing it a bit of a disservice. But here's the simple answer. Clark believed that right after the surgery, Mary died, that she went insane and died. But the truth is, she lived for longer, and Dr. Raymond didn't tell him that. She lived longer than he knew. She lived long enough that the great god Pan impregnated her, and that's where Helen came from, this kid Helen, that became this adult Helen that was the scourge of this city. And the reason I says that does it a disservice is because that's the story, but it's done so beautifully. And one of the things about this early weird fiction is the atmosphere and the creepiness, which is why I love it so much. Atmosphere and creep are my favorite part of horror. That's why, sometimes slashers, if they're just out and right gory fest, don't really do it for me. Because it's not violence. I mean, violence is scary, but it's not the violence that I want to see in horror movies. It is the atmosphere of creep, the horror of the unknown. That's what really excites me in reading horror stories. And this one really captures that. It really does very, very well. I feel like this would be really fun on a reread. Now that I feel like I understand the entire plot, I could go back through it and understand the subtlety of what he's saying a little easier than the first read through. So it's a little bit of a difficult read, but man, it is worth it. It is really, really fun. And just this concept of lifting the veil, I find very interesting. Like later, people would use this same analogy, this same metaphor when talking about LSD, right? That LSD lifts the veil of perception. It's something that's been in the zeitgeist, that's been part of our ideology for years, this idea that we do not see things as they truly are. But this is, I think, and I don't think it's the earliest, but for me, this is the earliest story I've read that deals with that subject, and I think it dealt with it very, very well. Wild, wild stuff. Really worth a read. All right. Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to help support the channel, please go check out our Patreon, and I will talk to you soon.